Chodesh Tov and a good Erev Shabbos. In the main, we should really focus our efforts on Semitism, Semitic acts, Semitic language. We should do all we can to support and encourage more acts of Semitism. That means more learning, more davening, more chesed, kindness to one another, mutual support, more love amongst Jews for one another, particularly those with whom we don't necessarily agree on everything. A few times in recent weeks, though, the topic of anti-Semitism came up, and in all honesty, it's not one of my favorite topics. Not because it's not important, not because it's not real, just because it doesn't seem to me that we have all that much power over it. We have many problems, no question about it. But this doesn't seem like one of those ones that's necessarily in our hands to solve. Jews feel alienated from synagogue or Kehillah life. That's a problem we can address. Maybe we can even solve it. Jews feel judged or unwelcome in some Jewish settings. Let's get to work on that right away, today, now. Jews feel like the cost of living Jewishly is overwhelming. Let's see what we can do to alleviate that. Not enough tolerance in Israel or between Israelis and non-Israeli Jews. Let's talk about it. Come up with some strategies and solutions. But the problem of anti-Semitism, that people don't like us for being who we are, what are we going to do about that one? So it seems a little funny that Jews organize marches against anti-Semitism. Like, who are we going to convince? You should really like us. We're really nice once you get to know us. If the church organizes a march against anti-Semitism, now that would be something. About 15 years ago, the former CEO of BMO, Tony Comper, who's not Jewish, organized a major campaign across the city, maybe across the country, called FAST, Fighting Anti-Semitism Together. Now that is something to applaud, something to write home about, like we used to say in the days when we actually used to write home. From time to time, though, the topic comes up in our weekly Parsha review, so obviously it's worth it to dig a little deeper into the story and see what lessons we can learn, what insights we can glean from anti-Semitism, and how to go forward from here, knowing what we know. It could be that some of the earliest recorded attitudes of anti-Semitism lie in these verses in Bereshis and Genesis, and there's insight to be gained, if not solutions to be had. We know Avraham from previous parshas as many things. He was a digger of wells. Well is a very important thing if you live in a desert, in an arid climate. It allows you to access a water supply from below ground, sustain yourself. There's a spiritual symbol to it also. Well digging might symbolize going below what's visible at the surface, bringing hidden sustenance and nourishment to an accessible place, as in dig deep within yourself. So when Parshas Toldos, our Sedra this week, when it opens just after Avraham's passing, and as its name implies, Toldot, or generations, we find a discussion of Avraham's legacy, what he left behind. We find his son Yitzchak and his wife Rivka starting a family of their own, twins, Mazel Tov, Yaakov and Esav. The contrast between the two sons is evident even in the womb, and in the opening incident of selling the birthright, we see a foreshadowing of later conflict in the parsha of deceitfully obtained blessings. But between those incidents, we come back to the topic of wells. A famine once, not more than once, struck this land. It's curious that this land, which God promised to Avraham and his descendants, that it would be a land flowing with milk and honey, so frequently finds itself unable even to feed its own inhabitants. So here again, in the second aliyah of our parsha this week, there's a hunger in the land. Rav Hirsch notes an interesting observation. This land, which was prone to barrenness and famine, had the potential, which was yet to be realized, of becoming a land of milk and honey through the blessings of Torah, even more than the sheer amount of sweat equity its inhabitants invested in it. That resonates with the idea that the Jewish people, also barren, as we've seen with the couples we've encountered so far, Avram and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, even as they refine themselves ultimately through Torah, they are fruitful and multiply, and they become a great nation. But back to Isaac redigging his father's wells. Yitzchak settled in Gerar at God's behest. He worked the land, he prospered. He did so well that the Philistines envied him. And so to foil his success, they filled in the wells that Avraham and then Yitzchak had dug. Furthermore, Avimelech, with whom Avraham had made a treaty, wanted to push Yitzchak off the land. Yitzchak redug the wells that the Plishtim had stopped up and even named them as his father had named them. The residents of Gerar were compelled to dig their own wells because they were now in this battle with Isaac's clan. In other words, they harmed their own water supply in their zeal to destroy Yitzchak's wells. A term that I don't use much at all in writing or speaking, at least in public, is the word stupid. However, last week, poking around in the library, I came across a short book by a professor of economic history named Carlo Cipolla. My Italian's a little bit weak. This book came out in 1976 and has been reprinted and become very popular since. It's called The Basic Laws of Human Stupidity. It talks about a segment of humanity that the author, Cipolla, argues are more powerful and influential than industrialists, more powerful, more influential than organized crime or any other group. Stupid people, as this book defines them, are those who act to cause losses to other people while deriving no gain for themselves and possibly losses. This is his technical definition of stupidity. Again, stupid people, people who act to cause losses to other people while deriving no gain for themselves and possibly incurring a loss. Banditen, ganavim, ganef is something else. They cause loss to other people, but it's for their own gain. We're talking about people who harm other people, and it doesn't do them, and it doesn't do the harmers any good. It maybe even damages them. It makes sense in the context of the Plishtim, the Philistines, and their effort to stop up Yitzchak's wells. The Philistines are also human beings, and they also need water to survive. It appears that while Yitzchak's wells were open, the Plishtim were able to enjoy drinking water from them. However, in their desire to harm Yitzchak, they stopped up his wells and caused damage to their own water supply. What do you call that other than stupidity? They harm others with no gain to themselves and even suffer deprivation from their own actions. Anti-Semitism, stupidity, maybe there's an overlap. How else to explain the ongoing, seemingly senseless animosity that the Plishtim express in word and action against Yitzchak? The forerunners of many trends in anti-Semitism that we've heard about or even experienced lies in this part of the story. Avimelech's original covenant with Avraham not to lie to him or to his descendants is twisted by jealousy. Avimelech says it clearly and openly. Ki yatzamta mimenu ma'od, you've become mightier than us. Ramban Nachmanides says this refers just to wealth. Netziv explains that Avimelech wanted to get Yitzchak to move because the local ministers were embarrassed by having someone of superior wealth living among them. Madua basam elai v'atem sonesim oisi. Why have you come to me? You hate me. Avimelech gaslights him in classic form, saying, we've done you only good. What are you talking about? So after the Plishtim confiscate Yitzchak's land and his wells, they're saying, we let you go safely. What are you complaining about? Sounds like Spain, sounds like the USSR, England, so many other incidents of expulsion in our history. To illustrate the story, Bereshis Rabbah relates a famous parable that you'll no doubt recognize. A lion had a bone stuck in its throat and offered the promise of a reward to anyone who could help it. A bird with a long beak came along and plucked this bone out of the lion's throat and asked then for its promised reward. The lion said, you put your beak in my mouth and you live to tell the tale. On top of that, you want a reward? You should be thankful you got to live. Isn't that enough for you? Midrash says that's what Avimelech was telling Yitzchak. Be grateful you're still alive. The Al-Sheikh HaKadosh explains that Avimelech fomented this resentment against Yitzchak's wealth to stoke the fires of resentment amongst his own people, the Plishtim, so that Yitzchak would get the message, would realize how unwelcome he is, and leave of his own accord. The message of Avimelech and the Plishtim sounds very much like the complaints of many nations against us over time. All that wealth you've amassed, wasn't that from us? Once you had one flock, now you have many flocks. Never mind what energy and effort Yitzchak put into growing, developing his portfolio, tending his flocks, whatever it was. The others perceive that his gain came at their expense, and they decide, that's it, enough is enough. Coming up in a few weeks, when we get to the story of Israel and Egypt, what does Paro say? Very beginning of Parsha Shmois. Hine Am Yisrael ravatzum mimenu. The Jews are many and numerous, more so than us. A few years ago, Sharona's cousins were taking a cab ride in Wrocław in Poland. They're native Polish speakers, so they're chatting away with the driver. He tells them, the Jews in this country, the Jews are ruining everything here. And they innocently ask, oh, the Jews, huh? How many Jews are there? He says, oh, there's probably about 80 million Jews here. The whole country's population is not much bigger than Canada. It's about 38 million. But there's 80 million Jews ruining everything. Halavai, there were 80 million Jews anywhere. Yeah, but from Avimelech to Paro to this cab driver, there's too many of them. Doesn't matter if the Jews are lazy and don't contribute. Doesn't matter if the Jews work hard and prosper. Something has to be done about those Jews. And as Yitzchak is on his way out, Avimelech reminds him, Kasher asinu imcha rak tov v'nishalechecha b'shalom. Remember, we've done only good with you. We let you go in one piece. Meaning the Plishtim wanted to harm them physically, but Avimelech stopped them. That was his claim. What harm? They're leaving behind their land and the resources, leaving their wealth behind. What do you want them to do at that point? Don't forget to tell them how nice we were to you. Ramban explains this whole incident, this whole story, does Yitzchak no credit. The only reason it's in the Torah is to explain the dynamic between the Jews and our haters throughout history. 3 wells dug and plugged up and redug. To Ramban, that says 3 temples, 2 built and destroyed, and another one rebuilt. What's clear is that we learn more about the Plishtim from their hatred and resentment and bitterness than we do about the Jews. So it's not a difficult conclusion to draw that the resentment and hatred towards Am Yisrael that the Plishtim's descendants, their actual descendants and their spiritual descendants, would later feel tells us a lot about them, much more than about us. Why not partner with the Jews, benefit from their knowledge and industry? Why not enjoy that the Jews seek to better whatever society they're in? We contribute scientific, literary, financial, technical know-how, really asking for very little in return. Why not appreciate that your society can prosper when you offer the Jews a safe home, whether it's Spain, Morocco, Persia, Poland, Germany, England? Who's prospered more than Canada and the U.S. for having offered the Jews a place to hang our hats? By the way, quick advertisement for our bi-monthly reading group. We're reading a book called No Better Home, Perspectives on Jewish Life in Canada, historically and in the moment. Watch the bulletin for the next meeting. Just reiterate, let's take a look again at that definition of stupidity, doing something that harms others even though it brings no benefit and may incur detriment. Never said this before, but how stupid is anti-Semitism? Not a single country has ever lost out by having a Jewish community in its midst, and arguably it's been in vastly disproportionate benefit to have the Jews living in your country. So again, I'll make the point, and if you think differently, I'm more than happy to hear your perspective. Anti-Semitism, it's not a Jewish problem, although obviously, painfully obviously, we suffer from its effects. It may not be in our hands to fix or cure because it's not dependent on how well we work or don't work, how much we support the regime or work for its change, how loyal we are to the state or the sovereign or the government. We always think if we just do this, then they'll like us. We're an easy target, we're a frequent scapegoat. And like Yitzchak in Parshas Toldos, we often find ourselves chased out of Anatevka, however long it's been our home. As Tevye said, maybe that's why we always wear our hats. What we can hope is that over time, as we keep doing what we're doing, others will finally break through their own short-sightedness and take inspiration from our dedication to be good citizens, to contribute to society, to live peacefully wherever we are, and to advance the cause of peace and harmonious civilization. We look forward to the day when the animosity finally disappears and we're able to look backward at centuries of anti-Semitism after it's finally disappeared and the message of peace that we've been preaching and living for thousands of years finally takes hold. May we all be taken by surprise by how soon that day comes. Good Shabbos.